Okay, everyone, I got a great passage to bring to your attention today. Pastor Patrick Walker here. Welcome. This is Hebrews chapter 10, starting in verse 32. Hebrews 10:32. It says, "Remember those earlier days after you had received the light, when you stood your ground in a great contest in the face of suffering. Sometimes you were publicly exposed to insult and persecution. At other times you stood side by side with those who were so treated. You sympathized with those in prison and joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property." I love that. You joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property because you knew that you yourselves had a better and lasting possessions. So do not throw away your confidence. It will be richly rewarded. You need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. Okay, here's what stood out. Three things, three blessings. And then I see 5 terms that are labeled, as persecution. So it says, this group of believers persevered in the face of suffering, insult, prison, confiscation of property, and persecution. So we have 5 terms about what came against these believers. But it says they joyfully persevered because, and then there's 3 terms that are used. They knew that they had better and more lasting possessions. So we don't mind giving up what's on earth because we know we're going to get something better and it's going to last longer. That's significant. They also knew, they had confidence that their action would be richly rewarded, and that they would receive what had been promised. So as I was thinking about those 3 terms, they were able to endure persecution because their eyes were not focused on what they were losing in this life, but their eyes were focused on what they would be gaining in the life to come. And that sounds very, very similar to the next chapter in Hebrews chapter 11, talking about the great men and women of the faith. When we get to Hebrews 11, verse 24, the passage talks about Moses. We see very similar language. Moses is a great example. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be mistreated. Now, it wasn't just happening to him. He willingly made the choice to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. Now, Moses grew up 40 years in Pharaoh's household. He had another 80 years of life into 120. Perhaps he would have lived longer, maybe a little bit shorter. But let's say he had decades and decades of a future where he was one of the princes of Egypt. He could have enjoyed the luxuries and pleasures, all that the world has to offer, ruling with Pharaoh's family. And yet he chose to give all of that up, to be mistreated, because he regarded, verse 26, disgrace for the sake of Christ as of greater value than all the treasures of Egypt. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ. So I'm not going to go into this right now, but he had to have known Jesus. How did he know Jesus way back then? Okay. And, but he had a vision. He had a picture. He knew what was to come because he was looking ahead to his reward. Whatever the reward is, it had to have been greater than what Moses gave up. So when we think about Hebrews chapter 10 here, the suffering, the insult, the persecution, the imprisonment, the confiscation of property, these believers joyfully endured all of that because they were looking forward to what God had promised. They were looking forward to something that was better and longer lasting, and they were looking forward to being richly rewarded. But we don't have much insight beyond those 3 terms. But when we turn to Moses, Moses willingly gave up everything that a man could want. Growing up in Pharaoh's household, perhaps one of the greatest empires at that time on the earth, tremendous riches, worldly pleasures, he willingly gave that up because the treasures of Egypt did not compare, verse 26, to what he foresaw in the future would be his reward if he followed Jesus Christ. So that's an amazing statement, because whatever is to come is greater than what Moses gave up. And I'm hoping that that is an encouragement to us, that when times get difficult, when there is suffering, there's insult, there's persecution, imprisonment, confiscation, when we lose things in this life, how can we do that with joy? We can only do that with joy if our eyes are focused on what will be gained in the life to come, during the millennial kingdom and beyond. That's where Moses' eyes were. That is where the eyes of believers in Hebrews chapter 10 were, and that is where our eyes should be as well. I hope this is a great passage for you to meditate on and to think about the inheritance, the future inheritance which Christ has promised his brothers and sisters, his family, the children of God, in the life to come. Give that some thought today. Meditate on this passage, Hebrews chapter 11, verse 24, and Hebrews chapter 10, starting in verse 32. Until next time.